And we are live with another Sunday edition of the College Pride Press podcast. My name is Brad Kruppel, as always, and I'll be your host tonight. We've got a great crew, as always. My co-host, Brett Siegel, will be joining us, as well as podcast regular Sean Bach and our bracketologist, Jonathan Warner. And so I'll let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit, starting with Brett.
What's going on, college basketball fans? It's NBA draft analyst Brett Siegel from Louisville. Today we'll be discussing the past weekend, the Big Ten ACC Challenge. I'll be touching on some draft stuff. Jonathan will be touching on some bracketology stuff. So we got a loaded sheet with you all. So just be patient with us, and we'll get through it all.
Yeah, we are ready to rock and roll. Full slate going on today. Jonathan, what's going on with you?
Hi, John. I'm Jonathan, freshman from the University of Kansas. College Pride Press's bracketologist. Yeah.
All right. I love it. I can't wait to hear what's going on with your bracket. Sean, how's it going with you?
What's up, guys? I'm Sean. I'm a senior in high school, cover Valparaiso and college basketball as a whole for College Pride Press. And yeah, I'm excited. The season's been going well so far, so excited for conference play to come up soon.
All right, I love it. And Sean's introduction is a great segue to talk a little bit about the other podcast we have at College Pride Press, the Game Day Pod. Comes to you Thursday nights. Sean and Noah are the heads of that podcast, so be sure to check that out. It's a great preview for a weekend and kind of the games that you should be watching. Something to definitely look at. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter at EDU Pride Press for all of our articles and updates about what's going on with the site. All right, so let's hop right back into it. Big Ten ACC Challenge was this week, so obviously we had a lot of great matchups. I'm just going to kind of open it up to the floor. What did you guys learn watching all those games? The ACC ended up winning it, but UNC got knocked off. So there were some very intriguing storylines. So Sean, what did we learn from the Big Ten ACC Challenge?
Well, what I learned from that is that the ACC, we know the two dominant teams, Duke and UNC, they'll most likely be the top two. But behind those two, I think it's really wide open. We saw Virginia almost lose to an okay Ohio State team at home. Saw Syracuse get torched by a veteran Wisconsin team. And then we saw Louisville, who came off blowing off a huge lead against Baylor at the Battle for Atlantis, beat a very good Purdue team. So in respect to the ACC, I really don't know who are going to be those 3, 4, 5, 6 teams, middle of the pack kind of, towards the end of the year. But I think it'll be interesting to see if any of those teams can compete with Duke and UNC. And I think that a team to watch definitely in the ACC will be Pitt. They did lose to Duquesne the other day, but they beat a very good Maryland team at Maryland, and their two studs, seniors Jameel Artis and Michael Young, combined for 47 points. They're the 1 and 2 leading scorers in the conference. I think that team could be a dangerous team to watch. They'll struggle a little bit, but with new coach Kevin Stallings, I think the future's bright for them, and they could get a couple wins, maybe sneak their way into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think it's so funny you bring up Pittsburgh. That was a huge win, so much so when I started working on my Sunday poll around Wednesday, I did have Pittsburgh at the bottom of my poll, and then they go on and lose to Duquesne, so that was all for nothing. Obviously, I took them off, but that was a huge win for them. Definitely a team to watch in the ACC. Jonathan, what were your thoughts on the Big Ten ACC Challenge?
Well, I took away the overall depth of the ACC. There are legitimately 12 teams that can make it to the tournament. Obviously, Duke and North Carolina are the two strongest teams, but overall, I'm looking at my bracketology. I have 12 teams in or close to being in my bracket at this current moment. So that's basically what I took away from it.
Yeah, I like all those thoughts. I think it's a great kind of opportunity to watch some of these teams, and you really do get to compare the two leagues to each other in terms of bottom to top, really. Brett, what did you learn from the Big Ten ACC Challenge?
With the games, I think it was pretty clear to see that the ACC is the more dominant conference, at least now it is. I wasn't impressed really at all with many Big Ten teams. I mean, the ones that won, granted, Illinois pulled out a win against NC State, but the ones who won in the Big Ten could be considered at the top of the tier, um, or who got big wins, we should say. So you got Wisconsin who won, Indiana had a big win. Those are both teams that we're used to seeing at the top of the Big Ten. And then teams who are usually in the middle of the pack or near the bottom, Illinois, Penn State, and Northwestern both pulled off victories. But, I mean, the ACC just rolled. We saw teams that are going to make the tournament this year and that either did last year or should have last year, like Virginia Tech and Miami, easily taking care of business. We saw Louisville beat a really good Purdue team. Virginia barely pulling out against Ohio State. But that's going to happen with Virginia this year. They're going to be one of those low-scoring teams because they're a very defensive-oriented team. So that's where they can be vulnerable to upsets like we saw this weekend when they lost. So it's going to be interesting this year in the ACC because we got a lot of different play styles and a lot of teams that are rebuilding like we constantly say. So it's just a matter of who goes out and who has the better shot that day. But we're always going to have Duke on top. We're going to have North Carolina on top. And like you guys said, too, we got a couple teams fighting for those 3, 4, 5 spots. We got Notre Dame, who's been looking very good this year. Louisville and Florida State both looking pretty solid. Virginia just coming off a loss, so we'll see how they rebound. Syracuse is always in the mix, but they're struggling early on this year, so it's going to be interesting how it plays out. On the other side with the Big Ten, it's kind of going to be similar to last year. Indiana's been looking very, very good. They're most likely going to be on top. And then you got your Wisconsin, you got your Maryland, you got your Michigan now. And then one team that I'm not really worried about right now, but we'll talk about them later, is Michigan State. Even though they're 5-4 to start the season, they're a young team. They have a tremendous amount of talent on that team. And they played the best team in the ACC. And it wasn't really a blowout per se. Duke won that one 78-69. And I think Michigan State could develop into a pretty nice team come time for March.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. The one team I did want to bring up is the one game, actually, is the Virginia Tech-Michigan game. Virginia Tech went into Michigan at the end of a 10-day road trip, which is unheard of in college basketball, and they beat them 73-70. And that's really an impressive win for Virginia Tech. And a lot of people, including I know Jonathan, was very high on Michigan coming into the year. So that's definitely a very good win. The outcome of the Virginia-Ohio State game was a little shocking, but Virginia ended up squeaking that one out. But overall, I think that the second-tier teams in the Big Ten really are a lot lower than they were last year. Maryland is taking a step back. They lost at home. And then you see a team like Purdue lose to Louisville, who, Louisville has had some offensive struggles, but yet they were able to put 71 up on Purdue. So you can see kind of the second tier is just a little bit lower than last year, and Iowa lost all those seniors. But I think the funny thing about the Big Ten ACC is, it's tough to really look, this league won, this year. And it's really all about matchups. And, I mean, if you look at a game like Miami against Rutgers, that heavily favors the ACC. And it's just all about, home games and road games. Syracuse is struggling right now, and they have to go into the Kohl Center. That was just a recipe for disaster. And I think, the 17-point margin really shows that, Syracuse really struggled, and it was against Wisconsin. So you can kind of see that, you can kind of get a gauge on teams, at some point, but at other points, Syracuse is going to play at the Kohl Center for the rest of the year. So it's, does you really knock on Syracuse for that bad loss? So that was kind of my initial thoughts on the Big Ten ACC. Always something to watch out. Early December, it's always a fun challenge for those teams to play. Next, I kind of want to talk about, we briefly mentioned it in each of our segments, but I just want to go down the line and which conference do you think is going to be the best this year, the Big Ten or the ACC? Brett, I'll start off with you.
The Big Ten has talent, but you look at the ACC, what are there, 4 teams that we don't think are going to contend for March Madness this year? and all the other 10 or 11 really are in the mix to make it this year. So I easily have to go with the ACC. But with the ACC Big Ten Challenge and then with the other challenges that happen throughout the year, it's just kind of a standing point and a guideline for the NCAA and for us viewers to see where each team is at. Because like you mentioned, Syracuse going on the road against Wisconsin, I think all of us here would have probably picked Wisconsin in that game, and we would have been right. But it tells us where Syracuse is in their progression going into this year, because they lost a lot of pieces last year, and they're really going to have to come together as a unit to fix these big gaps. The meaning of these challenges are not to like see who's going to be there in March. It's for all these teams to play either teams equal to them or better teams. That way these early freshman teams such as Syracuse, like we said, and then Michigan State, to see how they stack up against some of the best teams in the country. And I think we got a pretty good grasp of that. And I think it's going to develop into a pretty interesting SEC and Big Ten near the end of the year, and especially for conference play.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because, like I was saying with the scheduling, it can be so tough. You can't really knock UNC for losing at a Seminole. You can't really knock Syracuse for losing at Cole. You can't really knock Michigan State for losing against Duke. Those are just tough games and tough environments. So definitely something, as a measuring stick for the team, but I'm not going to say, the season's over because, Michigan State lost against Duke. Jonathan, do you think the ACC or Big Ten is going to be stronger this year?
I like the ACC. Just top to bottom, it is extremely deep, as I pointed out earlier. And then I also think there's 4 legitimate, whereas the Big Ten maybe has Indiana, Wisconsin. I think like Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, and Louisville, like all can win a national championship. It's all said and done. So I think the ACC.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And ACC with UNC and Duke is going to be really tough to beat. Sean, which conference do you think is going to be better this year?
Well, I mean, Brett kind of hit on all that, but yeah, like you look down the line, the ACC, I mean, you got Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, Louisville, Syracuse, Notre Dame, Florida State, good team this year. Like all those teams could make a big run in the tournament, and even like North Carolina State started off 6-2 and lost to Illinois the other day. But still, I mean, State Farm Center is not a very easy place to go on the road and win, especially with a young team like North Carolina State. I mean, up and down, ACC is much, much better. But, I mean, the Big Ten has a couple other up-and-coming teams. I mean, Northwestern has impressed me a little bit to start the year. They played a very close game against Butler at Hinkle Fieldhouse, so that's something to watch. I think Northwestern could be a good team this year, especially they got the talent, Bryant McIntosh. And you look at a team like maybe even Nebraska. They almost beat Clemson on the road, a very good Clemson team. And I just think overall ACC is a lot better, but there's some teams this year in the Big Ten that could definitely come out and compete and maybe like shock a couple people like us and maybe make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, those are all great points, and that's definitely going to be something we have to watch this year. Is those two conferences kind of prepare for conference play to begin in a couple weeks. All right, next up we're going to kind of do a weekend recap, but first I wanted to mention one team in particular that is 8-0 this year, and it is the Baylor Bears, all the way in Waco, Texas. They are 8-0, and listen to some of these wins that they have. They have a win against Oregon, a win against VCU, a win against Michigan State, a win against Louisville, and Xavier. So, I mean, those are some pretty impressive wins, some big names there. What are your guys' thoughts on Baylor and their season outlook as a team that really was not in the top 25 in the preseason? Sean, we'll let you start it off.
Well, I mean, I watched some of the Xavier game, preferably the second half, and it was a 1-point game, like with maybe 12 minutes left or something like that. And just like that, Baylor went on a huge run. I mean, Manu Luck, however you say his name, the point guard, he transferred from Miami. he really is a bright spot. He's a big key for this team. I mean, they haven't really had the best point guards in the past, from what I remember, and he just adds a totally new factor into their offense. I mean, he went 6 of 9 from three the other day, and he just he's the motor. I mean, him and Jonathan Motley, that's like a deadly guard center duo, and I really think with the role players that this Baylor team has, that there's a way that maybe they could knock off Kansas this year and maybe even win the Big 12 and end Kansas's streak, which would be huge for the conference. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, this is kind of going off topic, but I really don't know if Kansas has them in them. I mean, Baylor and West Virginia are two very good teams, but I mean, I think Baylor is my favorite in the Big 12 as of now.
All right, December 4th, 2016. Baylor is your favorite in the Big 12. All right, I have that noted down. You will receive tons of crap if that is if they end up flopping in league play. So just keep that in mind.
We'll see.
All right, Jonathan, what are your thoughts on Baylor? I know as a Kansas student, you must be very intrigued by the Bears.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch them progress as a team. I love Ish Wainwright as a player. He's not going to go out and get you 20 a night, but he does all the little things, which is not oftentimes talked about. And overall, they have the best resume of anyone. However, I would still say Kansas is the favorite in the Big 12 just because looking at how it's always gone in the past, it just seems like they always find a way to win the Big 12. And Kansas as well has great guard play, which might be tough for Baylor come Big 12 season.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. The one thing I wanted to ask you as a bracketologist, if you were putting a bracket together today, where would you put Baylor?
Based on the results, they have the best resume, so they would be number one overall. But I still kind of have it based on projections, so they're actually a 2 seed at the current moment, but they'll likely move up.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, this Baylor is definitely a team to watch. People have been throwing around the the number one overall in the rankings, which is pretty heavy stuff. The thing is, we say watch Baylor, but they don't play a notable game until December 30th against Oklahoma. So, watch Baylor, but you may want to take a month off because they play a bunch of cupcakes. All right, Brett, what are your thoughts on Baylor?
Well, here's the thing with Baylor, and here's an interesting stat. Like we mentioned before, they're 4-0 against the top 25 so far this season. 3 of those wins have been by double digits, and against the top 10, 2 of those wins were double digits. So, I mean, they can easily pour on points. They're not going to pour on a lot of points, but what's making this team very successful is their defense. They're 9th in the NCAA in points allowed. They're allowing 59 points per game to their opponent right now. And as a lot of people have seen, they're a second-half team. They may be down by 20 in the first half at one point, but that does not seem to bother this team. And any team that's shooting 50% from the floor and can shoot around 80% from the line as a combined team, I mean, that's dangerous. There's no other word for it. They're easily going to be contenders in the Big 12. I personally do not think that they're going to win the Big 12. I think that they're going to wind up slowing down a little bit. There's a lot of games left in their season to be played. And I mean, you can hop on the hype train at this point with Baylor. I would not be shocked if they lose some games on the road in the Big 12. I mean, that's just how it goes. I do not see them as a 1 or 2 seed in the tournament. I think they're going to be a little bit above where they were last year, around maybe a 3 or 4 seed. But yeah, this Baylor team, as of right now, and from the little bit of gameplay that we've seen of them, I think they have a legit 1-2 punch with Jonathan Motley and Manu Lecomte. Lecomte is an excellent point guard right now, and they're an excellent defensive team. So defense wins you games, free throws win you games late in March.
Yeah, those are all great points. And I think the one thing for Baylor, that's going to be important is they've done so much damage early that it's just going to be more about avoiding bad losses in the Big 12. And, losing to those bottom dweller teams can really hurt your resume because the top of the resume is looking really good right now. All right, so next we're going to talk about some of the games this weekend. Specifically, I want to hear about which games intrigued you this weekend and games that you were really keeping a close eye on. So we'll let Brett start it off.
Well, I think everybody that's a college basketball fan was watching on Saturday the UCLA-Kentucky matchup, and that was a fantastic game and a lot of future NBA talent that we'll touch on in a little bit. But I think that was the number one game to watch this weekend. And then yesterday it was full of crazy games. You got West Virginia upsetting Virginia, Baylor upsetting Xavier, Arizona not able to pull off the upset on Gonzaga but still hanging with them. And even the nightcap, Louisville against Grand Canyon, it was very close for a while. Grand Canyon was giving them a run for their money. Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Wisconsin blowing them out. So it's just these top 25 teams that we're going to start seeing every weekend. They're going to start picking off one another. And it's really going to solidify a top 25 for us viewers. And we're really going to see who the top 10, top 15 teams in the nation really are, because this early on in the season, all we really have are the Big Ten ACC Challenge and preseason tournaments where the rankings are just based on last year results and recruiting. So I think what we're really going to start seeing each weekend is true top 25 teams picking off the teams that don't belong there and solidifying a solid top 10, top 15 for us to look upon and figure out from a bracketologist's view, figure out where everything's going to fall, and then figure out which conferences are going to be represented in March.
I love it, and I think UCLA, we're going to have a special segment just on them. So that was a fantastic game, but let's hold off all of the UCLA takes for a few moments. So, Sean, we'll go to you next. What game intrigued you this weekend?
Well, I mean, the one that I watched a little bit was the Arizona-Gonzaga one. I mean, Gonzaga, basically the closest I can gotten, I think, was like a 5-point game. And just seeing, like, Gonzaga, seeing, like, what I heard is that they're like, this is Mark Few's best team at Gonzaga, like, ever, which is kind of a scary thought. I mean, seeing these, like, West Coast games, or all these just non-conference, just top 25 teams going at it is something that I hope, I love watching the non-conference top 25, and just seeing these two teams battle is something I really like to watch. So, I mean, Brett kind of talked about all the ones I want to talk about a little bit, but these kind of games this early on in the season is kind of a good indicator of what we might see come March. So that's all I had to say about that.
I love it. All right, Jonathan, what games intrigued you this weekend?
The game that intrigued me the most was the Virginia-West Virginia game. I'm a big fan of defense. I thought down the stretch, actually, West Virginia was able to impose their will and make the key shots down the stretch of the game in which, like, Virginia was unable to do. It was my favorite game of the weekend, at least.
Yeah, and I think that was a fantastic game. Not as high powered as some of the other games with all the scoring, but really defensive. A lot of pressing from West Virginia and the pack line D for Virginia. So that was definitely a great game to watch. Next up, I want to talk about a team or a player that impressed you this week. And we did this a few weeks ago on the first podcast, and I think it went pretty well. So just a team or player that impressed you guys this week. We'll go right back to Jonathan on this.
Again, West Virginia impressed me. I had a few doubts of them. Like, could they find the scoring down the stretch of the game after, like, the loss to Temple a couple weeks ago, or a week ago, actually. But they really proved themselves this weekend. especially winning at Virginia. I thought that was most impressive win of the week.
All right, Brett, what was the team or player that impressed you this week?
I know we're going to be talking about them in a little bit, but it was UCLA. And going into this game, this was the game for UCLA to prove to everybody that they're going to be legit this year. And they did so easily, putting up 97 on Kentucky, the most under John Calipari. And yeah, I mean, everybody on that UCLA team impressed me. There wasn't one person on that team that I was disappointed in. They all fit this mold that UCLA has this year. And I don't want to get into too big of details yet, but everybody on that team, especially TJ Leaf, really impressed me in that game.
I love it. All right, Sean, wrap us up here. Team or player that impressed you?
I mean, team that impressed me was the Wisconsin Badgers. I mean, I can honestly say after watching Wisconsin get blown out by North Carolina and absolutely having no life at all at Maui, I can say I lost trust in this team. So, but they proved me wrong this week. They dominated Syracuse and Oklahoma. Two very good teams. I mean, Oklahoma lost Buddy Hield and a lot from last year, but they're still a very talented team. Wisconsin just showed so much resilience in being able to bounce back. They got blown after a game blown out, and they just shot the ball well and played great defense. And, I mean, it helps playing at the Kohl Center, but honestly, I think they just played really well together. I mean, 77 points and 90 points are really high for a Wisconsin team, especially against very good teams. So maybe Greg Gard's putting together a new style of basketball over there in Madison. I don't know, but it seemed to help so far. So that's a team I've been impressed with this week.
All right, I love it. Those are all great points. Player that I was impressed with this week is, that's going to be Washington's Markelle Fultz. And I know everyone's talking about him for, NBA draft picks and stuff, but really, dive deeper into his stats. 56% from two, 48% from three he's shooting. Those are incredible numbers. Assist rate, he's 33rd in the country at 37%. He has to carry a huge load of that offense for Washington in a Washington team that has not been very successful this year. But, you can't blame Markelle Fultz for that. He has been an absolute stud. And he's definitely a player that NBA teams and college basketball fans are going to have to watch because, like Ben Simmons last year, he may not be in the NCAA tournament. So be sure to watch those Washington games when you get a chance. All right, next up, we are going to flip the script a little bit and talk about a team or a player that disappointed you this week. So we'll go to Brett first and let him talk about that.
Yeah, I was a little bit – I mean, it's really hard to choose. There were a lot of top 25 teams that went down, but the one for me that I was really disappointed in was Rhode Island. And they're coming off two straight losses. Just lost to Providence over the weekend, 63-60. Before that, they lost to Valparaiso, and again, a loss by 3. But the player on that team I'm really disappointed in is E.C. Matthews. This was a guy that could have been a mid-first round pick, maybe even early lottery a few years back. And coming off that knee injury, he's still playing really big minutes for them. He's playing 30 minutes a game, but he's just not giving them anything. The last time he scored in double figures was on November 19th against Cincinnati. And then he goes into single figures and they lose 3 out of the next 4. Granted, one of them was against Duke and nobody expected them to win that game. But still, E.C. Matthews is non-existent. 1-3 in the past 4 games. He's actually 1 for 13 from beyond the arc. So in order for this Rhode Island team to get back on track and to maybe claim an A-10 title, like a lot of people thought that they could this year, it's going to come from the play by E.C. Matthews because they had the pieces around him. It's just they need that outside guard to be able to hit shots, and he's not delivering for them.
Yeah, I love that Rhode Island take. Definitely a team that's fallen off a little bit. Jonathan, who's the team that has disappointed you this week, team or player?
I also had Rhode Island. From a bracketologist standpoint, they had a chance to really build their resume with some solid wins this week, and they lost both of those. And so now they're probably looking at it. They need to actually win the A10 if they're thinking about getting into the NCAA tournaments. Just, I feel they blew their shot at tournament just this past week.
Oh wow, that's heavy words, but I think it's very justified with the way they played. Sean, team or player that's disappointed you this week?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, I had Rhode Island too, but just seeing the way they played, it honestly seems like EC Matthews wasn't even a part of the team. And when they played Valparaiso, I mean, the game was it was close throughout, and then Valparaiso kind of broke away, and then Rhode Island got a couple lucky bounces at the end. But I mean, this Rhode Island team, like Jonathan was saying, they blew a couple chances to really boost their resume a little bit. I mean, they don't have much coming up. Like their best game in the next month or so is Houston, and then they play Dayton on the January 6th, and then they go right in, and then that's A10 play right there. And there's not really much in the A10 besides Dayton to really boost their resume, plus VCU. So, I mean, yeah, like they have to win out from here on out to be able to make it to the NCAA tournament, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I'm gonna go off a little off the beaten path a little bit. I'm gonna talk about a player that's disappointed me, and that's London Prentes. You know, he was supposed to be the senior that stepped up for Virginia to, take that role. Malcolm Brogdon had it last year and Justin Smith the year before, but he really has not played that well. As a lights-out three-point shooter, he's only shooting 35% this year from deep. That's not very good, and a turnover rate of 17.4. He's got to set up his teammates without turning the ball over and be able to knock down those three balls that he's made his entire career. So he's really kind of disappointed me thus far in the season, but still a lot of season to go. So you can definitely watch out for him to turn things around. All right, next up, we're going to talk about a surprising stat of the week, and this is a very open-ended question, so you guys can kind of go any direction that you'd like, but I will start off with Brett here. What was the surprising stat to you?
Again, coming from this UCLA-Kentucky game, every one of the UCLA starters scored in double figures. One of them, TJ Leaf, recording a double-double, and then UCLA out-rebounding a very tall and aggressive Kentucky team. That really surprised me that they were able to out-rebound them with Adebayo down low and Wendy Gabriel and even Malik Monk being able to get up there and grab some rebounds. But just them, all five of the starters scoring in double figures against a very good defensive Kentucky team. I mean, they're good all around, and to just go out there and pretty much put up 100 on them in Rupp Arena is just amazing to me.
Yeah, that's a fantastic stat. Jonathan, what was the surprising stat to you this week?
I read this on Twitter actually today. The Big 12 is 6-1 against the ACC. I think that kind of speaks to the depth of the Big 12, which right now it looks like they have 1 through 10. There's not a whole lot of disparity, I feel at least.
All right, I like that a lot. Then Sean, bring us home. What was the surprising stat to you?
Well, during the Big Ten ACC Challenge, Big Ten teams were 0-7 on the road against the ACC. I mean, I'm not sure if that speaks volume to the type of home court advantage that ACC teams have, or that Big Ten teams are just not really up to par this year. I mean, we talked about that earlier, that the ACC is stronger, but I mean, you'd expect Big Ten teams to at least get 2 or 3 wins on the road, especially against in the ACC or in the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
All right, I'm going to kind of go similar to my player that disappointed me. Stat that kind of surprised me, Melo Trimble shooting 28% from 3. That's horrible for somebody who has aspirations of being an NBA point guard. You gotta knock down shots, and that's 53 shots that he's taken, so it's not a very small sample size. That was that stat that surprised me. Next, we're going to talk about UCLA as promised, and big win against Kentucky. And, that program has been trending up. But the question I have to ask you guys is UCLA relevant again in the college basketball world? Are they back to being at that blue blood level that they were under John Wooden and others? We'll let Sean start it off.
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell early in the season. I wasn't really buying this UCLA team until they played Kentucky, but we all know what they did against Kentucky, and also I think it was in the John Wooden Legacy Tournament over Thanksgiving break. I mean, they just dominated teams. They played so well together. They're so balanced. I mean, their defense could be better, but everyone on that team just understands their roles. I mean, Lonzo Ball was struggling yesterday, and then TJ Leaf and Isaac Hamilton stepped up and combined for 37 points. And, Kentucky had no answers for them on the offensive end. So I think if they can keep balancing, they can stay balanced on the offensive end and keep dictating the pace and maybe playing a little more defense, I don't see why they can't run away with the Pac-12 and maybe be a number 1 seed come tournament time.
Oh, my.
Yeah, I mean.
Wow, the hot takes continue.
There's a lot.
Kansas is going to lose the Big 12, and UCLA is going to be a number 1 seed. Wow.
There's a lot of season left. I mean, the Pac-12, I could see them winning that. I mean, if they win that, I think they could be a number 1 seed, number 2 seed. I'm going to stick to my number 1 seed as of now. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. I'm having all these notes written down here. All right, Jonathan, go ahead with your take on UCLA. Are they back to that blue blood level?
I think they are, although I don't think they'll get a 1 seed. I have them as a 2, and I think down the stretch of the season they'll probably tail off a little bit. But I think they're back to being the UCLA of past. They have players averaging in double figures. They can basically just run away and hide scoring wise any game. 87 against Kentucky. They had one game where they had 119, 114 versus Long Beach State. I mean, they're just an offensive juggernaut this year.
Yeah, they're going to be able to fill it up. We'll go to Brett first before I give my take on UCLA. Brett, what are your thoughts on UCLA?
Coming into the season, I liked what UCLA was doing with their program. I liked Lonzo Ball coming in, and I liked TJ Leaf coming in. I thought those were 2 perfect fits for the system that Coach Alford runs there at UCLA. And this Kentucky game for me was really going to be the turning point on whether or not I believe that this UCLA team was going to become what it used to be and become a powerhouse in the Pac-12 and come March Madness time again, because they didn't really have many games coming up to this Kentucky game. Their best game, I guess you could say, was a neutral site game against Texas A&M. But these games coming in were just progression, getting ready for Kentucky and working on little things and getting these freshmen used to the system. And I really like that they had a cupcake schedule going in, but I like that they kind of did that. That way it eases these freshmen into the program and it gets everybody working as a unit, especially when you have the number 1 team in the country as your first away game. We'll see how their win hangover continues against Michigan. They're going to have a home game against Michigan next Saturday at 8 o'clock. And if they go back home and just crush Michigan, I think this UCLA team is really legit contenders come March Madness time. Right now, after this Kentucky win, I think everybody is jumping on board the bandwagon and saying that they're a Final Four team. But for me, I think I really do need to see a little bit more. I think I need to see a double-digit win against Michigan, and then at the end of December, they go to Oregon. If they can hand Dylan Brooks and Dorsey a loss there, I think UCLA could go a long way. And we've seen it. They have the pieces. They got bigs like TJ Leaf and Welsh down low. And then guards, you got veteran guards in Alford and Hamilton that are having some of the best – yeah, they are having the best year of their career so far. And then Lonzo Ball, who could be the number 1 pick come time for the draft. I mean, he's looking fantastic. Markelle Fultz is looking great too. So I think it's going to be an excellent battle between Fultz and Ball in the Pac-12 for the best point guard, best player. there. But I think really the turning point for this UCLA team, it's not going to be dependent on ball. It's going to be dependent on Bryce Alford and TJ Leaf down the stretch. They both play on the same side, and Leaf can easily step out and hit a three like we saw against Kentucky the other day. And if Alford can continue his hot stretch, this is just a very dangerous team. And right now, I don't see somebody beating them as of right now. Pac-12 play, we all know that they're going to suffer a loss somewhere. But I think that they can go undefeated at home this year.
Yeah, I think the thing to mention about UCLA is, that's the best win in college basketball thus far, winning at Rupp Arena. But the thing about UCLA is that, the Pac-12, none of those teams have really impressed thus far. Oregon has had some disappointing losses, trying to get Dylan Brooks back into the fold. Arizona, no one knows what's going on with Alonzo Trier, and those were kind of the three-headed monster of the Pac-12. So, they can really do some damage if those teams are kind of slow to getting it all together. All right, next up we are going to flip the switch a little bit and hand it over to our NBA draft analysis, Brett. There's a couple of things that I would love for him to talk about. The top 10 in the draft it's always very fluid because now we've seen some of these top freshmen play, and you can kind of get a read on who's going to adapt to college basketball and who's going to take a little bit to get acclimated. So Brett, I'll just let you give us your thoughts on kind of what's going on with the top 10 right now.
Yeah, I think you said it perfect right there. It's going to be dominated by freshmen. The only non-freshman I see in the top 10 really is going to be Ivan Rabb out of California. He's easily going to be probably the first big taken in the draft. He's just looked excellent this year, carrying over from last year when everyone thought he was going to declare, and then he decided to go back to Cal to polish up a little bit more. And I think it was a great decision on his part. Makes him a top 5, top 10 pick. But for me, the one thing I learned this weekend with the top 10 is that the 3 freshmen from Kentucky, Malik Monk, De'Aaron Fox, and Bam Adebayo, they all need to be in the top 10 of every scout's draft board. I mean, Malik Monk can literally shoot from anywhere on the floor, and we saw it late in that UCLA game. I remember watching it with my friend, and he had 8 points at one point. I look back, and he just hit 3 straight threes, and now he has 24 points in the game. So, and that's within a 1 minute, 2 minute span, and Malik Monk can just keep pouring it on like that. De'Aaron Fox is flawless with the ball. He's fast. He's athletic. He can play defense. He can rebound as a point guard. So of NBA scouts are going to like that. We'll see how these guys develop later in the season. And then Adebayo, who was very raw coming out of high school, we didn't really know what he was going to look like. Maybe a Sheck Diallo type player at Kansas last year, or maybe he was just going to explode. And so far, he's exploded. He's just looked very, very good for Kentucky. And I don't really see them dropping out of the top 10 unless they get hurt. Miles Bridges, I think, is easily a top 10 pick with his athleticism. We'll see how he comes back from the ankle injury. But other than that, players moving out of the top 10 as of right now, I think Harry Giles is moving down on a lot of draft boards. A lot of people thought he was going to be back by now, or at least practicing and maybe getting a few minutes on the floor. But that's not happening. Nobody really knows what's up with his injury. So I think an exclamation point and a star is being put next to his name on a lot of people's draft boards. And then one other player that's kind of borderline falling out of the top 10 for me is Jonathan Isaac. We've seen just greatness down at Florida State. I mean, Jonathan Isaac could have been a top 5 pick. Granted, the draft happened at the beginning of the season. He had an excellent summer, excellent finish to his high school career. He's tall, lengthy. He's 6'11", and he can play the 3, the 4, the 5 really for Florida State. But I don't know if it's Florida State not using him right or he's just not the focal point because Dwayne Bacon's there. But Jonathan Isaac just hasn't really taken over like he should be. So that's why he may be falling out of the top 10.
All right. And you've talked a little bit about the freshmen. The next thing I'd like for you to talk about is maybe some of those guys that decided to come back for an extra year to add some some polish to their game and look to improve their stock. Thomas Bryant, Justin Jackson, Dwayne Bacon. Do you think those guys are going to, shy away from the draft and maybe come back for another year because of this freshman class and how loaded it is?
I think it depends on two things. One, how their team develops throughout the year and how they look. And then two, is this the best season that they're having? Because you want to declare, or as one of these kids, you want to declare when your stock's the highest because all of them want to play in the NBA. So if you have career numbers and are on the Wooden Award finalists or whatever it is, yeah, I would say for these guys to declare because you're not going to get a higher stock than that. But if their team looks like what Ben Simmons was last year at LSU, because none of these guys are a Ben Simmons type player, and they may not make March, I think it would be smart, especially with all the crazy amount of freshman talent and a lot of the senior talent this year. I think it would be smart for them to wait that extra year. Freshman class next year that is very, very raw. We don't really have a large sample size of the freshman class coming in next year yet. So I think it would be a very smart move because this draft class could be one of the best draft class ever to enter the NBA. Freshman wise, I think the first round, half of them are going to be freshmen. So it would be very smart if your stock's not high, and if their team's not very successful this year, for them to wait it out. That way they can be the focal point of their team next year.
Yeah, those are really great thoughts, and I know we've had your updated big board as of about a week and a half ago. Whose stocks have risen and fallen since your last updated board?
I think it's safe to say that if you are on UCLA, I think your stock is rising at this point. They're just playing unbelievable basketball. Everyone. Monte Morris has been looking really good. I think he's going to be moving up. Tyler Lydon, a player that I've been disappointed in this year, could have been, or at the beginning of the year, I had him penciled in as a lottery pick. And in my past big board that I slid all the way down to 25. And I think he's going to be sliding down even more. Syracuse isn't really giving him opportunities, and he's not taking the opportunities that they're giving him. So I think he's going to be sliding down. And I don't want to say that Josh Jackson is sliding down my board yet from number 2, but I'm not impressed with what I'm seeing with him at Kansas either. He's putting up a solid 10, 11 points a game, but he's not really dishing the ball out for assists. He's turning the ball over a good amount, not shooting fantastic from the three-point range. So I really need to see a lot more from him within this next month for me to keep him in this top 5. And then we look a little bit more down in what I have the second round range. And I think one player in particular that Brad loves, Luke Kennard, I think he's easily skyrocketed into a late first-round pick at this point. We all thought it was going to be Grayson Allen and the freshman takeover at Duke, but no, this is the Luke Kennard show at Duke. And at Cameron Indoor, he's just pouring it on opponents, saying, Coach K, that's his go-to guy. Luke Kennard in the corner for a 3. So I think Luke Kennard could move up to a first-round pick and could be a first-round pick come time for the draft.
All right, I love it. And real quick before we move on to looking ahead, if there was one player that everyone should be watching to move up the draft board quickly, who would it be?
What was that?
Well, if there was one player that everyone should watch to as a potential fast rise in the draft board, who would it be?
That's an excellent question because right now I think it's whoever wants it can get it. I think both the guys at Baylor have an excellent shot to move up come draft time, Jonathan Motley and Nani Lecomte. I think some guys down here in Louisville have a chance to move up. I think VJ King could establish himself as a pretty solid pick. I would watch the Arizona freshmen, see what they can do there. And then the number 1 player I would keep my eye on, it's very tough to choose between some of these guys, but I would probably have to go with Luke Kennard with just the way he's playing. You got to watch him play. I mean, that's all I can say. This kid can shoot kind of like what I was saying with Malik Monk. He's been shooting from anywhere on the floor, and he's been the number 1 go-to guy on their offense, not Grayson Allen. So he's kind of taken this leadership role as a sophomore, and he's one of those quiet leaders. He leads by example, and I think he's doing an excellent job with that down in Duke.
All right, I love it. Luke Kennard's been my boy since last year. Dropped 35 over the weekend. Definitely a name to watch. All right, so we're going to bring the other analysts back in as we kind of shift looking ahead now up in this week. So, because you guys are listening to the podcast and I'll give you a little preview of the College Pride Press poll that will be released sometime tomorrow. So we have about 3/4 of the polls in, and right now it's looking like Villanova is going to take over the number 1 spot, followed by Duke, Kansas, Baylor at number 4, UCLA at number 5, and then 6 through 10 will be UNC, Kentucky, Indiana, Gonzaga, Louisville. So as I said, we've got about 75% of our writers in there. So that looks to be like the top 10. A lot of moving around going on. So can I just get your instant reactions on kind of the top 10 poll now that we have the Big Ten ACC Challenge and some key matchups in? So we'll go to Sean on this.
I mean, it's pretty obvious. We've seen Villanova kind of put together. They've had a couple nice wins so far. I mean, the win at Purdue has probably been the most impressive win of the year so far. And then Duke, we all know with those freshmen coming back that they're going to be a team to watch. I mean, it might be a little difficult at first to get them all to gel, but we'll talk about that later. So I think Duke definitely deserves a number 2 spot. And then Kentucky, I mean, Kentucky's Kentucky. They drop out, but they're young, they're talented, but I think Coach Cal is going to find a way to put that together for sure. UNC, I mean, they had that loss in Indiana this week, but I'm not really worried about that loss because Indiana is just a tough place to play, as we've seen. They've beat the last 6 AP top 4 teams that have come to Assembly Hall have all lost. So not really worried about North Carolina. Kansas, I mean, Josh Jackson's got to come together if they want to be a better team. UCLA, we saw what they did at Kentucky, balance, and yeah, I mean, Lonzo Ball, even with his struggles, they played really well. Baylor, I mean, we talked about them earlier. Jonathan Motley, Manu Lectome. Gonzaga, they've been a surprise team. I mean, Mark Few's best team while at Gonzaga is what many people are saying. So that's kind of a scary thought to think about. And in Indiana, we saw them. I mean, they lost to Fort Wayne, but not really worried about that loss at all. And then the loss against Fort Wayne, then 2 solid wins against Kansas and UNC. I mean, you got to kind of look at the positives about this Indiana team. I mean, they got talent, they got speed, they can shoot, they can do just about anything. The main question is going to be their defense. So they deserve a number 9 in mine. And then Virginia, with that loss against West Virginia and then almost losing to Ohio State, they dropped down a little bit. But I'm not really worried about Virginia. I mean, Tony Bennett will figure something out. He'll find a way to get these freshmen involved with London. And London's got to figure something out too. So that's my thoughts on my top 10 poll.
All right, I love it. Jonathan, do you have any instant reaction you'd like to add about the top 10 for this week?
In my opinion, I feel like there are a few teams that have just like kind of separated from the rest of the pack at this point in the season. Villanova, Indiana, Kansas, Duke, UCLA, North Carolina, Kentucky, Baylor, and Gonzaga. Like, those are very solid 1 through 9, at least I feel. They have really separated from, like, the rest of the polls, just in my opinion.
All right, I love it. But Brett, do you have any instant reactions you'd like to add about the top 10 this week?
Well, I think the top 10, and I want to present a question to you guys. I think it all depends on where Kentucky and North Carolina drop. So, Brad, where do you think Kentucky and North Carolina fall to? Do you think they fall out of the top 5? Do you think somebody maybe ends up at 10? Where do you think they fall?
I moved UNC from number 1 to number 2.
Then Indiana number 1. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Don't at me on that one. But next Saturday when Villanova loses to Notre Dame, you guys will all be moving Villanova down here. So I'm just beating you guys to the punch.
Yeah, so I think again, if UK and North Carolina, I think UK is going to move down to around the 5 area, and I think North Carolina is going to move around 6, 7. Of course, we're going to see Virginia, Xavier both dropping out of the top 10. That leaves room for Gonzaga, Baylor, Creighton, and UCLA to all move up. We're easily going to see Villanova at number 1. I think we're going to see Kansas at number 2. I do think we're going to see Duke at number 3. But what's going to be surprising is at number 4, it's tough for me. It's not going to be Gonzaga. It's not going to be Creighton. I think it's between UCLA and Baylor. And if they don't put Kentucky at 4, I think it's going to be UCLA just because of the win right now, the head-to-head over Kentucky, and then put Baylor at 6. But I think right now we have a solid 6, 7 teams, and then throw Gonzaga in the mix there. I think all 7 of those teams right now are the powerhouses that we're watching in college basketball. And then you got really solid teams on the outside of the top 10 that could be cracking it this week, like Indiana, Louisville, Wisconsin's starting to play really well. Butler's been playing really well. I think all these teams have chances to move up and maybe pull some upsets.
All right, I love it. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun week in college basketball. Now I want to talk about one of those top 10 teams, the Duke Blue Devils. As you know, we've mentioned them a few times throughout this pod, but I want to talk about their freshmen. Finally, we're getting to see a look at their top-rated recruiting class with Jason Tatum and Marcus Bolden finally taking the court against Maine. Obviously, not a top competitor, but still good to see those guys on the court. What are your outlook now that two of those 3 freshmen are on the court and finally getting acclimated? We'll go to Brett first.
I keep saying Duke is my national championship this year, and I think the return of the freshmen are just solidifying that. Of course, they're not given huge minutes yet. I mean, we saw a little bit of Tatum. We saw a little bit of Bolden. Tatum put up 10. Bolden put up 7. Bolden got 5 rebounds. Tatum got 8. So I think, for one thing, what this does for Duke is it finally gives them that depth that we've been talking about that they're going to have. They got a game coming up against Florida on the 6th, and they're going to run right past Florida. If Florida pulls an upset, I'm going to be absolutely shocked at that one. I am expecting Tatum and Bolden to combine for 30 in this one. I think this is really going to be their statement game. I think Kennard's going to be himself. I think Grayson Allen's going to be himself. I expect Duke to put up 80 plus, maybe even more on this Florida team. And I think it's really going to make a statement to the college basketball world that the loss to Kansas was just a lack of depth at that point. And we've touched on it so many times that they were playing with only 5 guys in that game. Granted, Kansas did play a terrific game against them. I'm not taking anything away from their win. Duke team just all around have the pieces to be the national champion this year, and I think anything less than a national championship is going to be a big disappointment for them. We're still waiting the return of Harry Giles, and if he can come back and really be who they're saying they are, this team is not losing a single game.
All right. Hot take, but I like it. Sean, what is your outlook on this Duke team now that they have the freshmen back?
Well, I mean, it's going to be hard for Coach K to sit these guys like Luke Kennard. I mean, I hope his playing time doesn't go down. I mean, I don't see why his playing time will go down. I mean, these guys are coming back, but honestly, I think it's just going to be how the only team that can beat Duke is Duke themselves. I mean, they have the most talent in the NCAA. They have Frank Jackson, who's been great at point guard, and Grayson Allen, arguably the 2 best leaders in the nation. I mean, Frank's still a freshman, but he's shown that he can lead this offense. And I think it's just going to be a matter of getting the freshmen to know that, like, it's a team. They need to understand that they're not not going to be the stars for this team. They're going to have to be able to fit into each other in their roles and be able to maybe pass the ball to get in a better shot, a shot that they would usually take in high school or before an AAU. They need to understand how to play a team game, and I think if that happens, then, like Brett said, I really don't know if Duke will be able to lose a game this year.
Oh wow, okay, that's 2 on the Duke one loss for the whole season. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on this Duke team now that they have the freshmen?
Well, it comes at a good time because Grayson Allen is banged up right now. They get their chemistry down. I mean, there's no reason they shouldn't win a national championship. I mean, they took Kansas down to the wire, made them have to for playing with 6 players. Tatum and Bolden will add depth. I mean, maybe Giles comes back. If not, I mean, they're still a championship team without Harry Giles. I mean, there's no reason for them not to win the national championship.
Wow. All right. You guys really kind of hit it all around. Duke's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Give me UNC in the ACC this year. So I'm not quite as high on Duke as you guys. All right. So now we've talked about some of the teams that have been disappointing and struggling. Which teams are you really starting to worry about that are struggling? So we'll start off with Brett on a team that he's worried about.
I think one team that I'm starting to worry about coming from the Big 12 is Iowa State. Suffering that really heartbreaking loss to Gonzaga, lost by 2 to them, and then a 1-point loss to Cincy. I'm not really liking what I'm seeing defensively from this team, and they're very inconsistent. We've seen them put up 130 on not great Citadel team, but then come around and then score 54 against Cincinnati. So they're really up and down. Monte Morris, he can only do so much for this team. They're going to need people to step up in George Niang's spot and McKay's spot. They lost him last year too. And it seems like Monte Morris is the only one coming out to play for them every single game. And nobody else is really stepping up. I mean, he's really the only one that 3-point land. Also, Mitchell Long is starting to step up and develop nicely into a go-to guy for Morris. But Iowa State is always known to be up there in the Big 12, and if they really want to make a statement this year and prove that they don't need Niang to win, I think that they're going to really have to come together these next few games. They do have some good games coming up. They got at Iowa. That's going to be an interesting game for them. Iowa, another decent defensive team. And then starting conference play, they got Texas Tech and Baylor back-to-back. So those are 2 games where they can really make a statement that they're here to play in the Big 12. If not, they're going to end up in that maybe 6, 7, 8 range in the Big 12 with the way they're playing right now.
All right. I love it. Definitely look out for the Cyclones who seem to be cycloning down, LOL. All right, Jonathan, team that you are worried about that's struggling.
I'm starting to worry a little bit about Michigan State. I know they're extremely young and they'll get better, but I mean, going over it, it's not the losses they have, it's the fact that they're only beating Florida Gulf Coast by 1 point. And then yesterday, they only beat Oral Roberts by 4. I know Miles Bridges wasn't there, but I mean, there comes a point where you're looking at it, they need to be beating those teams by more than a combined 5 points. I mean, at least just in my opinion. So I'm going to say Michigan State for that.
Yeah, Michigan State's definitely a team that you're going to have to start worrying about because I think everyone says, oh, the talent and the tough schedule, but those injuries have piled up and, they keep playing close games to bad teams and losing to good teams. So, Sean, team that you're worried about.
Well, I said Michigan State as well. I mean, you can't be considered a very good team when you barely beat a team that is almost sub 300 according to KenPom. Oral Roberts is 271, and I mean I thought they turned it around. I mean they lost to Baylor in their second game of the Battle for Atlantis, and then they beat a very good Wichita State team in the third place game. And I thought after that maybe they could turn this thing around. And then they played Duke pretty tight, but, I mean, Duke only had 6 players. And they come back home and almost lose to Oral Roberts. And you'd think that they'd have it turned around by now, but, I mean, I'm starting to worry a little bit for Michigan State. I know I always had to bite my tongue on this one because every year I say this when they're struggling at the start, and then I get proved wrong come March. But I don't really know with this team. There's a lot of question marks left to be answered, but a player I really like for them lately has been their big man, Nick Ward. I mean, he's been the lone bright spot, basically won the game for Michigan State the other day, putting up 24, and had a couple nice games recently, 11 against Duke, 13 against Wichita State. So that's their one bright spot, but they got to get their role players going. I mean, we all thought Eron Harris was going to be a stud this year, but he's done almost nothing besides having that big game against Florida Gulf Coast, and they almost lost that game. And then he's had 12-point game, 14-point game, 13-point game. He's been efficient from the field, but other than that, he hasn't really done anything. And we thought he was going to be the Batman to Miles Bridges' Robin this year, but he hasn't really proven that at all. So that's kind of something I'm worried about. Hopefully he can get going and turn the season around, but I really don't know at this point.
Yeah, that's very up in the air. And you know, Nick Ward, I have been very impressed with him, but the rest of Michigan State team really hasn't shown me that much. All right, next we're going to talk about teams that are struggling that you may not be worried about. So we'll go back to Brett on a team that he's not as worried about in their struggles.
Yeah, the team I'm not worried about is the team that you two are worried about, and that's Michigan State. And I think up in East Lansing, one word needs to be said, and it's spelled RELAX. Relax. And they got some easy games at home coming up. They're not going to be traveling a lot like they have been these past few games. So that jet lag fatigue is not going to be there. They have about 6 weeks until their next biggest game at Ohio State and then at Indiana. So Miles Bridges has some time to get over that injury, and I think this is good for them that Miles Bridges is actually out because you cannot depend on one guy if you want to make a run in March Madness. We're going to have to see guys step up. We're going to see Matt McQuaid step up. We're going to see Nick Ward step up like he already has. And we're going to see Aaron Harris, who's supposed to be the senior leader of this team, step up. All these guys are going to come together. And I think they're actually going to turn this season around beautifully. I think they could easily come in second or third place in the Big Ten after a really rough start to the season. Maybe even challenge an Indiana team who looks like the number one team in the Big Ten right now for the Big Ten title. It all depends on how they come together as a team right now without one player that, for me, that really needs to step it up and that needs to get more playing time is Joshua Langford, the freshman for Michigan State from Alabama. This kid has tremendous athleticism and is a very good defensive player, and he's going to start seeing some more minutes with Bridges out. So he needs to take advantage of those minutes and prove to Tom Izzo that he deserves to be out there on that floor. And if this Michigan State team can start crushing these easy opponents at home without Miles Bridges, I think that there's nothing to be worried about if you're a fan of the Sparties.
All right, I love it, kind of contradicting the other guys. All right, Jonathan, team that you're not as worried about.
I'm going to say Iowa State.
Oh, geez.
I mean, you look at they lost by Gonzaga and in overtime against Cincinnati by 1. I mean, that's a combined 3 points in losing. They beat a very good Miami team by 17 handily. I mean, we know there's questions regarding their front court, but when they get hot, a very good team offensively, and they'll figure it out. I mean, just in my opinion.
All right, Sean, team that you're not worried about.
Well, I mean, usually we shouldn't be worrying about a top 10 team, but I feel like I've seen some stuff on Twitter that this Virginia team, I mean, they barely beat Ohio State, which nothing to take away from Ohio State. Virginia, with the talent they have, should be beating Ohio State by maybe 10 points on the road, but or at home. But they Virginia was down for most of the game and had a crazy comeback, and London Prantes carried them. And then a couple days later against West Virginia, they just fell apart in that second half. And like the last couple minutes of the game, it just wasn't pretty for them. And I wouldn't blame it on the loss of Austin Nichols. I mean, it stinks that they don't really have a true big man, but he only played with them for really one game. So I don't think they're losing really much. But as we've seen in the past, Virginia knows how to turn around. Tony Bennett's one of the best coaches in the country. And I think London Parentes will really start coming along. And along with freshman Kyle Guy, who I'm a really big fan of. He's very efficient from the field, can knock down the three, take you off the bounce. I think he needs to get some more playing time a little bit to help with the scoring and help Parantes, pick up the scoring. But all in all, I think this Virginia team will be all right. I don't know if they're ACC champion worthy, but I think they'll make some noise for sure.
Well, just remember that only one team can win the ACC, and if Duke's going undefeated, then Virginia's not going to win it.
Exactly. I mean, I said that.
So just so everyone knows. All right. So now we're gonna move on. Talk about the games this week that are intriguing. What games are you guys watching? We'll just throw it back to Sean and see what games he's watching this week.
This week I will be watching Florida at Duke, or it's at Madison Square Garden, I believe. That would be a very fun game to watch. Florida's a bit of a surprise team this year. Creighton has a very tough road test against Nebraska. I'm not really sure what day that is. I think it might be Wednesday. But Nebraska has been a surprise team, I think. Glenn Watson is very good at the point guard position. That would be a good game to watch. And Xavier versus Colorado. They kind of talked about at the beginning of the year, Colorado could be maybe a sleeper in the Pac-12, and we've seen with this Xavier team, they're very vulnerable to lose. We saw them get blown out at Baylor. So I think Xavier could be on upset alert against Colorado. So those are the three games I'll be watching this week.
All right, I love it. I'm definitely going to be watching that Xavier team. That's a team I'm not as high on. All right, Jonathan, games that you're watching this week.
Iowa State, Iowa, just that rivalry always tends to games. And then Notre Dame, Villanova. I think Notre Dame's kind of like flying under the radar in the ACC a little bit. So we'll actually get to see, are they a legitimate ACC contender or not when they play Villanova. So those are my watch, at least.
All right, I love it. Brett, bring it home. Games that you're watching this week and are intrigued by.
Definitely intrigued by that Villanova Notre Dame game. It should be interesting how Josh Hart stacks up against VJ Beecham. Game is going to be a shootout. I think the winner is going to be in the 80s in that game. So a lot of high scoring in that one. It's going to be fun to watch. Monday night, tomorrow night, Syracuse against UConn. I think that's going to be an interesting game. This UConn team, if they really want to get their season back on track, they need to win against tough Syracuse defense. And Kevin Ollie is going to be very good against a zone defense with his zone offense. So we'll see what this Connecticut team can give us. If they don't give us a lot, it's a lost season for UConn. But if they can pull off a win against Syracuse, I think Kevin Ollie has a little bit up his sleeve. And then the final game I'm going to be watching on Saturday at 8 o'clock is UCLA home against Michigan. And this will really solidify for me if I'm buying into UCLA's stock for a Final Four team this year. Right now, they're looking very, very good, even though really the only team they've played is Kentucky. They're blowing out everybody else, and they're taking each game and playing it like it's against a top 25 opponent, which I really, really like to see from a team perspective. I think all these guys are coming together as a unit, and it should be interesting to see if they can beat Michigan. And then on the other side for Michigan, are they really going to lose another game? Are they going to follow this win-loss, win-loss, win-loss pattern like they did last season? And it ultimately hurt them. And I don't know. I think this game's going to be very interesting. I think it's going to come down to the final few possessions, but I would not be surprised to see UCLA blow them out.
Geez, you guys are stealing my notes. I thought I was going to have the UConn-Syracuse game all to myself, but that'll be a fantastic game. And the other game, Villanova, Notre Dame. My buddy up in Notre Dame's been hollering at me to give Notre Dame some love in the poll, and they finally cracked in this week. But it could all change, good or bad, depending on how they do against Nova this week. So that's definitely going to be a game to watch. All right, we're good.
Don't sleep on that Montana State against South Dakota game either.
Hey, Montana State's always a tough out, all right? Okay, all right. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the Wooden Award. And you guys think the Wooden Award this year is going to be mostly the freshmen with the finalists? We'll throw it to Brett to give us his thoughts on that.
Well, can you name anyone else besides Ivan Rabb who's in contention for it?
Joel Berry.
That's it. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's going to be a freshman winning it this year, whether it's Markel Fultz, Josh Jackson, Lonzo Ball. I think any of the freshmen on Kentucky have a shot at it. I think any of the freshmen on Duke have a shot at it when they come back. For me, I think the only two non-freshmen that have a chance of winning it this year, based on what I've seen so far this season, is Ivan Rabb and then Luke Kennard. Maybe Grayson Allen, throw him in there too. But these are really the only guys I've seen that have really been producing for their team. I still need to see a little bit more from Josh Hart. If Villanova can pull out a really good victory against Notre Dame, and he's really stellar in that one, I think he moves up the charts too. But me personally, I think a freshman's winning it this year.
Wow, if Luke Kennard wins the Wooden Award, I don't even know what I'm gonna do.
I would.
There's so many things wrong with that picture if Luke Kennard wins it. All right, we'll go to Sean. Thoughts on the Wooden Award this year, being mostly freshmen on the finalist?
Well, I mean, I think it's a mix at this point. I mean, I really think a freshman will win it, but I mean, my kind of stains right now is Markel Fultz, Lonzo Ball, and why not? Maybe even like a Laurie McCartney. However you say his name, or Zach Collins. I mean, those freshmen have really impressed me. Then you have upperclassmen like Grayson Allen, Josh Hart, and the dark horse, in my opinion, Alec Peters. I mean, if he can lead Valpo to a conference championship, who knows? I mean, if he makes a run in the tournament, that'd be pretty sweet. Best player to come out of Valpo, so that'd be pretty cool. I wouldn't sleep on Peters. His shooting numbers haven't been very good this year, but he's been playing better, so hopefully he can get those up and lead Valpo to the tournament.
Yes, Alec Peters. I'm fully on the Alec Peters train. You've got me on that. All right, Jonathan, what are your thoughts on the Wooden Award?
I think there'll be like maybe a couple first teamers from the freshman class, but I still think a senior or junior are gonna win it. Right now, Jonathan Motley, Josh Hart, Frank Mason, they've best players, at least in my opinion, to this point in the season. Luke Kennard as well. I don't see a freshman winning it, just in my opinion, this year.
All right, everyone's jumping on that Luke Kennard train. This is incredible. It's like a dream come true for me. Although
it's Ryan Klein train.
But now it seems like it's just too cool to be on the Luke Kennard train. It's cool to be off it. So I may be hopping off of the Luke Kennard train and hopping onto the Matt Jones train. You know, just go from one Duke role player to the next. All right, so finally to wrap up the show today, Final Four. We're gonna give me your Final Four if you had to pick today, college football playoff style. Who would be in your Final Four? So we'll start it off with Jonathan.
If we're gonna do college football playoff style, I have no clue, but in my opinion, these are the four teams I think will end up making it to the Final Four. I have Villanova, Indiana, Kansas, and of course Duke.
Wow.
I just think they're the four best teams at this point.
Love it. Loving the Hoosiers. IU Villanova in the Final Four. Give me that all day, every day. All right, Sean, who's your Final Four?
UCLA, Indiana, Duke, and Kentucky. My
Ooh,
four.
ooh.
Really think those are the top 4 teams in college basketball. I mean, maybe UNC, maybe they could sneak in there, but as of now, those are my 4.
All right, Brett, who's your Final Four?
Well, if we're doing it college football style and the season was to end today, I think we're going to see Villanova as the overall number 1. I think we would see Kansas as the number 2. I think we'd see Kentucky at 3 and then Duke rounding it out at 4. But my honest opinion on how I think the Final Four is going to play out, I think we're going to easily see Duke there, no doubt about that. I think we're going to see Kentucky there, no doubt about that. And these final 2 teams right now are up for grabs. I think Kentucky and Duke are a lock for the Final Four. Granted that they don't end up as a 1 and 2 on the same side of the bracket, which I don't see happening. But the last 2 spots are up for grabs, and I got to give one of them to UCLA right now. I've explained what I love about UCLA, and they got all the pieces of being a Final Four team and maybe winning a national championship on that team. So I'm going to pencil them in as the 3rd team there. Then the 4th team is really up in the air between North Carolina and Indiana for me. Both these teams looking really good, but with Indiana beating them head-to-head right now, I'm going to put Indiana slightly above UNC as the 4th team in the Final Four.
All right, I'm going to kind of keep the same train a little bit, but I'm going Duke, UNC, Indiana, UCLA. Should be a great Final Four. If UCLA falters, it's going to be Wisconsin. So it'll be a Big Ten ACC challenge in the Final Four, which will be fun for everyone. So that is bold takes for the Final Four prediction. Definitely something to watch as the year goes on. And we'll try to do Final Four picks kind of every month. Brett and I will on the pod, so you can see how we updated them. All right, so just kind of wrap up. Anyone have closing thoughts? We'll just go to Brett real quick, and then wrap it up.
I think it's just going to be watch and see how each week plays out moving forward. I think there's going to be lots of upsets that we can see happening, and I think there's going to be lots of shifts in the top 10, top 25, along with shifts in my draft board. Check that out. I'm going to be coming out with another one near the end of December before the new year. New year, new college basketball, new conference play. So that's something excited to be looking forward to. And I think it's just going to be week by week. We're talking about some of these teams that are really high this week. I think in 3 weeks, some of them we may not even be talking about as relevant anymore. And that's just how college basketball goes. So it's going to be fun going forward.
All right, I love it. Jonathan, any final thoughts?
I want to give credit to the 11 remaining unbeatens: Notre Dame, South Carolina, UCLA, Butler, TCU, Southern California, or USC, Villanova, Creighton, Baylor, St. Mary's, and Gonzaga. I want to give them credit for still being undefeated at this point.
All right, I love it. Great closing thought there, Sean. What is your closing remark?
I mean, who would have thought we'd see schools like South Carolina and TCU sneak into our top 20, some of our top 25 polls. So that's pretty cool to see. Seeing some of those teams, you would argue maybe football schools, but it's kind of cool to see their basketball programs taking a turn and putting some nice talent out there for the fans and the students. So that's pretty cool to see.
All right, I love it. I'm just gonna wrap it up. I've got my final project for my classes due a Thursday morning, so it's gonna be it's gonna be a grind until then, and then I will be a free bird to watch all the college basketball I can from Thursday evening until like January 10th or something ridiculous. So it's gonna be a great month of watching and talking about college basketball. Most likely we'll have another pod next weekend, so just be sure to look out for that. Thanks for joining, and thanks to Sean and Jonathan for being our guest analysts this week.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good day, guys.